Thank you, Michael. Good, so we finished the design stages. You know, there were two big challenges today. One was getting everybody out for the networking sessions, and the other one was getting people up and down here without falling down. And we failed on the second one. Yeah, so we've got the design is finished. We've got a fully federated clash resolve model. Steve's now ready to start work on the construction. It's interesting because, yes, while the model is now data rich, it's at the construction phase that most of the data is going to need to be captured. This is where most of the building products are purchased, installed and commissioned. So let's hear from Steve now to see how he manages that with the end goal of handing that over to the customer in mind.
Okay, thanks, Clive. Okay. The room this time, so see if we can address you all. Okay, construction. Let's get the thing built now. Lots going on, lots of modelling information, lots of geometry information. And the first thing I'm going to do is develop this BEP, the BIM Execution Plan. Okay, the architect had developed one, but it's a very, very design-focused BIM Execution Plan. What I've got to look now is how I develop this design BIM Execution Plan and move it more into construction. Because I've got to consider not just my team, but my subcontractors, the manufacturers, the fabricators out there, even the decorator, even down to that level. We've got to capture things. We've got to capture what paint finish is using, what batch number is used, so we can match it up if we need to. That needs to be documented in there. We need it defined so we know how we're going to deliver it. Formats we're going to deliver the information in. Formats we're going to deliver the geometry in. And all good stuff like that. So if any of you are looking for working on a project and the BEP is a continual one that's been developed right from stage 1 or 2, just consider what other things should be added to that. Because there are things that will impact this stage of your project through into handover and make it more successful for you. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is really start concentrating on this level of detail. And there's a few things in here because of this. I don't know whether you've noticed, I've changed my numbering here. And that's using the new AEC UK Technical BIM Standard numbering. And it just fits the way I'm doing this project better now during the construction stage. Because I'm going to develop some of the placeholder objects and replace them with real objects that I'm now going into procurement with. And it's really, really important that, because I need to manage it the same way as we've done during that design stage. We need to still manage it in the model element table. But now, obviously, we're going through to handover. Exactly the same process. But we need to consider the information. We've been saying this all day. Space management. I know that the spaces within Revit will feed directly into FX360, which is the client's FM system. So for me, I've got to tick in the box now, because I know that I can manage them spaces correctly with this required data, and that's going to put a tick in the space management side of this project for the client. I need to consider the assets. This is going to be my problem. This is where I need to start engaging the manufacturers and people like that who are building these valves and getting the correct data out of them. I don't want their data sheet that's got every single valve they manufacture and a highlighter pen through the one they've just sent me. I need specific data for the element that's installed on site for the client to manage. Okay? And that's really important and how I'm going to do that. So I'm going to show you processes on how I'm going to capture this data. And I'd say the reason I've changed the LOD and the level of detail of these models is to take the manufacturing process and the people I'm engaging with into consideration, because their models are actual manufacturing models. They build from their models, they push it into CNC machines and things of that nature. Now, if I was a manufacturer, I wouldn't want to pass this around, because that's holding a lot of my intellectual property rights. And if I'm not careful, if I start passing this around on projects, before I know it, in 6 months' time, they're going to be replicated by somebody out of the UK at half the price that I can generate them for as a manufacturer. So I don't want to start putting LOD 500 or LOD 6 or something against my components, certain components, because it's just not fair to try and drive the manufacturing into that way of thinking. So we need to start considering different LODs against them elements. Now you can see that if I actually ask for an LOD 500 against that valve, there's something like 322 faces to that model. Imagine putting 500 of them in my building. I know the client's going to have to buy some new hardware to manage his model when we receive it, because he's not going to be able to manipulate it and walk through it with that many valves of that detail. So to me, the valve is fine here at an LOD 100. It's the right dimension, it's the right form, the right shape. When the client walks through the model at handover, he's going to be able to see the valve and still see it's physically there. He's going to be able to click on it, and the most important bit, it's got the right data behind it. So for me, as long as it looks physically correct, it's dimensionally correct, it's the information that's going to drive the asset management system that the client's going to implement. And I'll come back to how I'm going to manage that later. Right, so I've got a lot of people I now need to engage. Door manufacturers, the MEP side of things, the fabrication of a lot of these elements. And the way I'm going to manage that is by using PAS 91 to put that in my pre-qualification questionnaires. And there's some key points in PAS 91, and it's really to help me to ensure I get the right people to help me on my journey to deliver the project correctly. And in there are just key questions just to ask. But I actually want to get a bit more detail, because if they don't actually deliver the information correctly to me, I'm going to have to end up inputting a lot of information myself to ensure it's handed over correctly. So I need to look at a BIM assessment. And that'll be part of my invite to tender to the supply chain. And in there, it will define how you're going to do certain things, how you're going to deliver the geometry, how you're going to get the information to me. And that'll give me some confidence that I'm actually engaging the right people to deliver the right things that I need, because I don't want to kick back from the client, because I don't know they may employ a consultant to check what I'm handing over to them. I've got to ensure I hand over everything that meets that EIR requirement. And it's to that right detail, and it's got the right amount of information against the elements. Now, I said data collection is so important, and I mentioned in my bid before that I was going to use mobile technology. And this is the means that I'm going to actually use to collate that information. And I'm going to use it so that everybody's got a certain access to the database that's sat behind the media here. So it's not just pushing models into iPads and Windows tablets and Android tablets and things. It's the data that's behind it as well. The information, the 2D traditional data that we use on a construction site. And I'm going to implement something that's really going to help me. And it's really going to reduce my risk on site. And that's something called point layout. Now, what point layout is, I'm actually going to bind the model into an iPad first. And then using point layout, it actually links the model to a total station. So it's like reverse point cloud capture, laser capture. And what it's going to actually do is give me key points in that building to help me set it out. So it's going to give me the key corner points to put the shuttering down, so I can start laying the foundation strips, etc., correctly in the right place with minimal manual surveying. It's going to start, once I've built the building, allow me to laser guide when I'm actually going to drill to put things in, because I'm doing modular build. So I can do this work while the things are being built off-site. I can start putting the fixings into the precast concrete and stuff. I can start drilling the holes to host all the services that are going to come on site, knowing that it's going to be correct. And it's giving me confidence. So hopefully that's going to help me deliver and meet this very, very tight time scale I've got, because the amount of pre-work I can do before things are delivered on site. So let's move this into some of the technology I'm using as well. Now, remember we did a synchro model for the bid. That's a bid model. This is your construction sequence during a live job. So you can see now I've considered the laydown area where it's going, the piling, the position of the tower crane, actual when the fabricated steel frames are going to be delivered on site. Is the laydown area big enough? Now, it's tools like this I use every Monday morning now to get my team together and show them what activities are going out on site that week. They're aware of what scaffolding is going up on which facade to do certain jobs. They know not to work in that area. So it's improving my health and safety issues on site. People are aware of the activities that other team members are doing that week. And it's also proving detail. Because if I get a delayed delivery of something, what's the impact? I could put it in here, move the plan, and see the impact on the build and the surrounding features of the model. So it's very similar to what we did at the bid stage. It's just gone into a lot more detail. And the good thing is this list here, that's all the activities that's going on the site on that day. So if I do have a problem, I can pause the model, look at the list, and see who's affected with the problems I've got on site that day and address that very, very quickly. And let them know that they may have an impact for a day or two, but they can see what tasks and that are actually impacted during that procedure. The other thing I've got as well is something that the AEC industry is way behind in the manufacturing. Now, if you look at automotive, you look at aerospace, you look at manufacturing of components, you've all seen exploded views. We've all seen that exploded view of the valve with all the balloons on it and then a bill of materials on the right-hand side of the sheet. And that's giving people clarity of how things are assembled. Now, within Revit, I've got the model, so I can actually use exploded views in Revit. I can start pulling this model apart into all the components that's been put into it at the moment. It's a process that's been proven for 20, 25, 30, 40 years in a different industry. And all we're doing is now being able to bring it into the AEC industry and aid contractors in how to split this model up, bring things apart and label them up for other people to get engaged. Not everyone's a wizard at looking around models, but producing drawings and images such as this where we can actually fragment all the elements in that model is adding value. And I'm not modelling anything extra, it's just using that existing data again. And I can keep going through that, really fragmenting everything. So, great tool, but it's just aimed at clarity and giving that information to the people who need it at the right time. Field BIM. Now, this is probably one of the most important aspects of my implementation during the construction. And the first thing I'm going to look is bringing documents into the field. Now, it's not just electrical images. It's drawings that I'm going to use to build this building. But do you know what the most important bit is? These drawings are actually up to date. Now, one of the last jobs I worked on, I was walking down the corridor there, and the guys were putting the cable trays in. And I said, why are you putting the cable trays there? Well, that's what it says on the drawing. So I looked at the drawing. They're working off revision D. I said, it's on revision F, that drawing now. Why have you got D? Oh, it was in the back of the van for the last few weeks. I'm just using that. It happens. That's what this is alleviating. And also, because they've not just got drawings, they've got the data sheets as well. They've got all the information they need to have at their fingertips to fulfill their tasks. We all know what it's like on site. You're out there, you need some extra information. What do? Stroll back to the site hut, you have a bacon butty, a coffee, read the paper, pick the piece of paper up, get on site, you've wasted half an hour, and you're back to where you were. This alleviates that. You've got the data at your fingertips. It's up to date, and we can actually read, not just drawings, any information we need. That is fully up to date. It's not just me that's looking at that as well. The client can see what's in there. The client can actually see what data is being collated as the job progresses. And that's really great. Behind it as well is the model, all linked. The model, we can switch things off. You've seen there, I've just switched the ceiling off. So if I'm installing them services and the drawing's a bit congested, I can come into a 3D environment and just have a look in that area. Just, what's where, what's that? Right, I understand the drawing. Now I know where I'm going. Not guessing and walking away quickly so someone else sorts my errors out. Doing it the right way, right first time, and that's what it should be like. And looking there, if you look on the right-hand side there, the grey images, that image is loading all the data in that's coming in from the model. Nice, but not all the information I need. I need to collate extra information. I can isolate objects. So if I've got a problem with this elbow here, it's been delayed. But with this tool, I can isolate it and just check around it, just to ensure that I can come back to it next week when it is actually delivered and still get to all the bolts and torque it up and compress the gasket to make sure I've got no leaks. I've also got in here augmented reality. We saw a bit of that before. Holding the iPad and just looking at the model as we hold it round. Having a look at what's above that ceiling if it's installed. Having a look behind that wall, etc. But it's just using the model again. And these are tools that are now coming onto the construction site just to aid the whole people into finding the right information at the right time. Other things, barcoding. Now this is great because I can't see my guys on site actually standing there all day trying to walk around this model because, well, one, I won't get anything built because they'd be all playing and think they're on PlayStation all day. But with a barcode, you can barcode scan it. There's extra information. This in white is additional information I formatted to collate against that asset. So you barcode it, there's the extra information. That's what I want because that's what the client wants. Not what's in the high level of Revit or wherever. This is commissioning data. This is about your warranties, your serial numbers, things of that are normally only delivered to you on data sheets. It's not that what we want it linked to the asset, and this is how we're doing it. Yeah? All this great information now, and it's given me real confidence that I can fulfill these requirements that the client's pushed onto us to collate certain data that's just out of the norm. There's actual other things we can do in here as well. We can click show model. So for that barcode, after we've collated the information, it's going to take me straight to the model. So I've barcoded the pump, I've collated the information of the pump as I'm commissioning it. There is the pump. I can now look round it, I can isolate it, I can look at the geometry that's come through from the modelling tool with my extra additional information. I can also look at associated documents that's linked to that pump. So there's lots in there that I've got, and it's really moving things forward. And I mentioned earlier in the bid stage that we've actually got things linked to it for testing, for functional testing and things like that. Sort of things that we need to fulfill. So before I do any work on that pump, I need to go through this and sign off that I've actually isolated the power, I've isolated the feed, etc., to the pump, and it's against me. There's also snagging in here as well. You can see I've got a problem with this pump at the moment. They've got some flaking paint on the base plate. But what it's allowing me to do is still from that barcode, so I'm still linked to that asset, is put some snagging information against that pump so it can get fixed before we actually do the final handover. And it's not just about collating the data about that snag. We can capture what it is, whether it's a safety issue or a QA/QC issue, whether it's badly installed, whether it's not fit for purpose, things that may delay. All this data we're collating is going back into a database which people can read on that desktop version of this, and it'll show me graphs of who's creating problems like this. And I can start getting them things resolved and hopefully a quicker, smarter delivery of this building at handover. Now, it's not just about collating information here. As you know, a lot of the snagging tools on the market, people work in 2D still. And we can put a pin drop in here by using that and place it directly in the model. But like we're saying, how many maintenance guys are around who can actually place and work and manipulate 3D geometry yet? It'll come, but at the moment it's probably a bit slow into the construction site. What I'm doing here is creating a snag, but linking it to that same asset, but in a 2D environment. So I'm creating the problem, I'm creating the photograph of the problem, creating any documentation that may sort of help me adjust the snagging and that. So there's some photographs I may apply to the problem I've got. And all that is going to be linked to one pin on the 2D plan. And you'll see it come up now. And you'll see these other pins in there. And it's just starting formulating all the snagging, all the problem I've got, 2D environment, but ultimately it's linked to the 3D environment and all the assets. So you can see I'm placing that. It's as simple as that. Now, if I didn't want to sort of merge photographs and documents into all the snagging, I could just be in this environment and add further pins, just as a lot of the sort of independent snagging software that's out there at the moment. The beauty of this is it's fully linked into the model and into the other data that we can assign to the problems we've got. Now, I did mention that the problem I've got is the subcontractors. And we all know, hopefully now, why we're maybe having some problems engaging them, and that's the detail of this model. Now, what this is something called shrink wrapping in Inventor. Is there any manufacturers in the audience today at all? Brilliant, good. And what this is, it's reusing their model, but just simplifying it. Because as I said before, we don't want all this detail in that model. We want it simplified, and I'm sure the manufacturers want it simplified, so it's not giving everything away. And by using things like this, you can see this screw thread. I don't want 300 of them screw threads in my model, I just want a little cylinder. So it's actually replacing all the pictures of the screw thread just by one surface, so it'll have 3 faces then, just as a cylinder. And you'll see we'll tick there, and it will actually change it from a screw thread to a cylinder. That's simplifying that model. And we can take out the internals, so people can't manufacture this again. And we can just get into other bits of detail, but hopefully you can see by engaging with manufacturers and helping them that they can simplify this process and pass over that right amount of geometry that I need, but there's still the right amount of information sat behind this. So I'm covering both things here now. Yeah, I don't want all the geometry, I've covered that. I'm still collating the information. I don't want these holes in that hand wheel. I don't want to see that walking around, especially at the scale I'm going to be walking around at. So that's certainly a way of helping manufacturers come on our journey and move forward with this. Now, I mentioned in the bid that we had some problems as steelwork moves over into manufacturing, and how we sort of label up the connection plates and things of that nature. Well, this is something called advanced steel. And what this is doing is allowing the Revit model that's been developed from the earlier stages to feed directly into the advanced steel product. And as you can see here, it's as simple as selecting 2 components, putting the moments into that connection point, and it'll actually put the plating in its place. So I'm not having to go to this other tool and start looking at other formats now. It's a way of capturing the information but linking it into with Revit, etc. So, and also on the MEP front, it's not on the video here, but MEP 2016 Revit, I don't know whether any of you know, but CAD duct or fabrication MEP, probably, well, it has got the UK's largest manufacturer's library in there. And Autodesk purchased that a few years ago now and rebadged it Fabrication MEP. And what they've actually done now is migrated the content of Fabrication MEP or CAD ducts into Revit MEP. So what that's going to help me now is to try and keep the detail and the fabrication of the services also in Revit. So that's going to help me deliver that expectation of that EIR of 3 Revit disciplines. I'm seeing vision of how I'm beginning to do that. And hopefully my supply chain and the subcontractors are seeing technology like this that's going to help me deliver that aspiration of the Revit delivery. So the building's built. I need to do this verification process. So as we know, we can get teams in to help us laser scan the area. I hope you've talked to Plowman Craven guys before. It's over there. But using Navisworks, we can now bind the laser scan and the models into one environment, and we can see what we're doing wrong. So that image I showed you before of the beam, it's just using Navisworks. So it's reading the data that we're getting in from the point cloud with the model that should be now as built, and just simply walking around it and ensuring that the data in both environments are LOD 500 as built, and I can now provide with confidence a true as built delivery as required. Right, so all I've got to do now is look at handing over all this data. because it's not as simple as handing over 3 Revit models. I've collated information in different places. And you can see here I've got the data that's in the model. Great. That's going to help with the graphic side of the FM system for the client. But I've collated the majority of the information in a field system. Now, the field system is a SQL database. And luckily for me, the FX360 system is also a SQL database. So what I need to do is look at merging the 2 fields within the different databases to migrate that information over now. That's great, but what about all the O&M information and health and safety information that's normally delivered in 6 transit vans and 16,000 lever arch files that are never touched again? I've been collating them in that common data environment. I structured the common data environment in such a way that when the supply chain were engaged, they actually put the correct data that I was asking for in a corresponding folder structure. That folder structure was structured in such a way that it replicated the O&M or health and safety manual. If the client wanted to, now it's not part of his EIR, they could produce hyperlinks out of the model, out of spreadsheets in the FX system, and link straight to the O&M and health and safety information just by hyperlink. Now, I wouldn't touch the live data, the live document, because if it ever gets updated, you've got a problem of trying to update all the links and everything. Just if it's structured in this common data environment, just replace it in there, the hyperlink will still work, because everything should be still named the same. So hopefully you can see that I've tried to deliver everything that the clients required. I've delivered an as-built model, data-rich information that's not just information at a high level, it's information during commissioning and delivery, and all the corresponding information that's normally delivered through the common data environment but linked into that client's FX360 system, which is their FM system. So hopefully you've seen some good tools in there, some ways that we can collate this extra information that's required. It's not all about just delivering a model. Just think about ways that we need to collate it and make sure that we can meet them clients' requirements specified in that EIR document.